She had always lived under control, calculating every step, until the night she decided to break the rules. A secret auction, a planned encounter, and a man who seemed to know more than he should. When the truth emerged, it became clear that nothing was by chance. She had been lured into a trap. Now it was no longer about pleasure or power, but about discovering who was behind the game before it was too late. The reflection in the mirror didn't lie. Evelyn Morgan, at 38, still maintained the same elegant posture that had helped her conquer New York 2 decades ago. Her green eyes, inherited from a distant Irish ancestry, scanned the red dress she had chosen for that night. It had to be perfect. Everything had always been perfect in her life, meticulously planned since she left Albany with just one suitcase and many dreams. The Empire State Building stood imposingly against the night sky of New York, and her penthouse apartment was a silent witness to her rise. From intern to CEO of the country's largest cosmetics company, every step had been calculated. Every smile, every handshake, every decision had brought her here. But tonight something was different. For the first time in years, Evelyn felt her heart race with the prospect of the unknown. "Ma'am, the car is waiting," announced Maria, her housekeeper of 15 years, interrupting her thoughts. Evelyn adjusted her black pearl necklace, a gift from her late mentor, Victor Caldwell. "Thank you, Maria. Don't wait up for me tonight." The private elevator took her directly to the garage, where Charles, her driver, waited with the door of the Bentley open. "Good evening, ma'am, to the Plaza Hotel, correct?" "Yes, Charles." Evelyn slid into the car, feeling the Italian leather under her fingers. New York traffic flowed surprisingly well for a Thursday night, as if the universe was conspiring in her favor. The Plaza Hotel, with its iconic architecture, was the perfect location for what was about to happen. The auction wasn't listed on any official agenda, not even on the most exclusive pages of social columnists. It was an event for a select few, very few. At the reception, a man in an impeccable suit was waiting for her. "Good evening, Ms. Morgan. Please follow me." Without need for identification or formalities, Evelyn was led through corridors that weren't part of the common route for guests. The room was smaller than she had imagined, but exclusivity was stamped on every detail. No more than 30 people occupied the chairs arranged in a semicircle. Evelyn recognized some faces: entrepreneurs, politicians, heirs to old fortunes. Everyone there shared not only wealth, but a desire for something beyond the conventional. Evelyn Morgan, what a pleasant surprise. The melodious voice of Beatrice Vanderbilt, an old college friend and current New York State Secretary of Culture, reached her. "I didn't know you attended these events." "First time," Evelyn replied with a contained smile, accepting the champagne flute a waiter offered. "You seem quite familiar with them." Beatrice laughed, a crystalline sound that hid something more. "Oh, darling, you have no idea what happens at these auctions. It's not just objects or companions that are for sale. They're unique experiences, moments that can change a life." The lights dimmed softly, and a middle-aged man took the small stage. His presence commanded immediate attention. "Welcome to our little gathering. As you know, discretion is our first rule. What happens here stays here." Evelyn felt a shiver run down her spine as the first lots were announced. Uncatalogued artworks, historical documents that officially didn't exist. And then the experiences began. That's when she saw him. Among the lots presented, one man stood out, not for his beauty, although he was undeniably attractive, but for something in his gaze, something familiar that she couldn't quite define. When their eyes met, Evelyn felt as if he could read every secret she kept. "Lot 17, announced the auctioneer, "a night without rules with our most special companion." Evelyn hadn't planned on bidding. She wasn't that type of person. Her life was built on rational, calculated decisions. But when the first offer was made, her hand rose as if it had a will of its own. The bids rose quickly. Beatrice, beside her, observed her with a mixture of surprise and amusement. "Evelyn Morgan bidding on a man? This night is more interesting than I thought." When the hammer fell, Evelyn was the winner. The man on the stage kept his eyes fixed on her, an enigmatic half smile on his lips. At that moment, she didn't know it, but she had just taken the first step towards an abyss that would change her life forever. "Congratulations," Beatrice whispered. "But be careful, darling. Sometimes, what seems to be a night of pleasure can turn into something much more complicated. Evelyn barely heard. Her eyes were fixed on the man who was now descending from the stage, moving with feline elegance in her direction. Her heart was pounding, not from excitement, but from an almost anguishing anticipation. There was something about him, something that aroused not just desire, but a deep unease. The presidential suite at the Plaza Hotel had a privileged view of New York City. Evelyn watched the lights twinkling through the panoramic windows, trying to control the anxiety growing in her chest. The champagne in her glass remained untouched, forming small bubbles that rose incessantly to the surface. Nervous? The deep, melodious voice surprised her. He had entered the room silently, like a feline studying its prey. He wore a navy blue Italian suit that seemed to have been sewn directly onto his body. "I don't usually do this kind of thing," Evelyn replied, maintaining the composure that years of corporate meetings had taught her. "Actually, this is the first time I've participated in an auction like that." He smiled, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Are you sure, Evelyn?" The use of her first name without any prior introduction made her frown. "I don't remember us being formally introduced." "Marcus Taylor," he said, approaching with calculated steps. "But you already knew that, didn't you? Or at least you should have known." Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. There was something about the way he looked at her, as if he knew not just her name, but every secret she kept. "Why should I have known you?" "Interesting how memory can be selective," Marcus commented, pouring himself a glass of whiskey, "especially when we want to forget certain situations." Evelyn's heart raced. There was something familiar about him, something that prodded a distant corner of her memory but refused to take complete shape. "What are you talking about?" "Victor Caldwell," he said simply, observing her reaction with clinical attention. "The name still means something to you, doesn't it?" The mention of her former mentor made Evelyn pale. Victor had been more than a mentor. He had been the man who transformed her from a simple girl from upstate into one of the most powerful executives in the country. But that was before. "How did you know Victor?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "The question isn't how I knew him," Marcus replied, approaching until he was inches from her. "The question is why you're here tonight. Why, after so long maintaining such a controlled, such a perfect life, did you decide to participate in this auction?" Evelyn felt his perfume, a sophisticated blend of sandalwood and something else she couldn't identify. It was an impulsive decision. "You? Impulsive?" He laughed, a low and almost threatening sound. "Evelyn Morgan doesn't do anything on impulse. Every step you take is calculated. Every decision is weighed and measured. That's how you got to the top, isn't it?" His words hit her like small arrows, precise and painful. "You don't know me." "On the contrary," Marcus replied, his eyes fixed on hers. "I know you better than you imagine. I know, for example, that every Thursday you visit Victor's grave. I know you keep a safe deposit box at the bank, with documents that could ruin several powerful people. I even know about that night in the Hamptons, 15 years ago." Evelyn felt the blood freeze in her veins. That night in the Hamptons was something she had buried in the deepest place of her memory, something no one should know about. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice now a whisper. "The question isn't what I want," Marcus replied, moving towards the window. "It's what they want. And they've been watching you, Evelyn, for a long time." As if to confirm his words, the room phone rang, making Evelyn jump. Marcus observed her with an enigmatic smile as she stared at the device as if it were a bomb about to explode. "You should answer it," he suggested. "After all, that's what this night was organized for." With trembling hands, Evelyn picked up the phone. The voice on the other end was familiar, terribly familiar. "Good evening, Evelyn. I see you finally decided to step out of your comfort zone. It was about time." Her eyes met Marcus's, who continued to observe her with that unsettling smile. The night that should have been a controlled adventure had just turned into something much more dangerous, and she was trapped in the middle of a game whose rules she completely ignored. The phone slipped from Evelyn's hands, falling heavily onto the thick carpet of the room. Her legs weakened and she had to lean on the nearest armchair. The voice on the phone belonged to someone she hadn't heard from in 15 years, Sarah Caldwell, Victor's widow. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Marcus commented, still maintaining that irritatingly controlled posture. "Or perhaps just heard one." "What does Sarah have to do with all this?" Evelyn asked, her mind working frantically to connect the pieces of this disturbing puzzle. "Why now, after so long?" Marcus walked to the window, observing the night city. "Did you really think you could bury the past forever? That it was enough to build this empire of success and power to erase what happened that night?" Evelyn closed her eyes, and the memories she had tried so hard to suppress emerged like bubbles in boiling water. The Hamptons, 15 years ago. The beach house where Victor used to retreat to think about business. The encounter that would change everything. "I was just a junior executive at the time," she murmured, more to herself than to Marcus. "Victor was preparing me to take over the company presidency." "Is that the story you tell yourself?" Marcus questioned, turning to face her. "That it was just a natural succession of power? That Victor chose you for your talent and dedication?" "It was true," Evelyn protested, standing up abruptly. "I worked hard for that position, every promotion, every recognition, every compromising document carefully stored," he completed, raising an eyebrow. "Every business secret catalogued in your private safe." The blood froze in Evelyn's veins. How did he know about the documents? That was her only guarantee, her life insurance carefully built over the years. "Victor wasn't the man everyone thought," she finally said, her voice low and controlled. "He built an empire on lies and manipulations. I just ensured your own survival," Marcus suggested, approaching again. "But you didn't stop there, did you? After Victor left, you continued. Every board member, every influential politician, every powerful businessman, they all have something to hide, and you kept every secret like a loaded gun." Evelyn felt her face burn. It was true. Over the years, she had collected information, documents, evidence, not out of malice, but out of necessity. In a world dominated by men who saw her as an intruder, she needed guarantees. "And now?" she asked, facing Marcus. "What does Sarah want? Why are you involved in this?" An enigmatic smile crossed his lips. "Let's say Sarah isn't the only one interested in the contents of your safe. There are very powerful people who would like to have access to those documents, people who have nothing to lose." Evelyn's cell phone vibrated in her purse, a text message from an unknown number. "The Hamptons. The beach house is still there. 48 hours. "They want me to go there," she murmured, showing the message to Marcus. "The question is, will you go?" Evelyn looked out the window, observing the city she had conquered. 15 years building power and influence. 15 years keeping secrets. Has bargaining chips, and now everything could crumble. "I don't have a choice, do I?" "There's always a choice, Evelyn," Marcus replied, his voice softening for the first time. "But sometimes the price of choosing is greater than we can imagine." The room phone rang again, but this time neither of them made a move to answer it. The sound echoed through the room, like a harbinger of what was to come. "Why are you telling me all this?" Evelyn suddenly asked. "What's your role in this game?" Marcus stared at her for a long time before answering. "Let's say I have my own reasons for being here, and maybe, just maybe, I'm the only person you can trust right now." Evelyn laughed bitterly. "Trust? In someone who was clearly sent to manipulate me?" "Sometimes," he replied, approaching until their faces were inches apart, "the declared enemy is more trustworthy than false friends." His perfume enveloped her again, and Evelyn felt that familiar sensation of danger and attraction. Somewhere in her memory, a door was beginning to open, revealing fragments of a past she might not be ready to face. Morning arrived with the typical New York drizzle, enveloping the skyscrapers in a ghostly mist. Evelyn hadn't slept. After Marcus left the night before, she remained awake, her mind working incessantly to connect the pieces of that disturbing enigma. In her office on the top floor of a midtown skyscraper, she watched the city awaken while typing commands on her laptop. Years of corporate paranoia had taught her to keep meticulous records of everything and everyone. In a specially encrypted folder, she began searching for any mention of Marcus Taylor. "Maria," she called through the intercom, "can you come here for a moment?" The housekeeper, who had worked for Evelyn for 15 years, entered the office silently. Maria was more than an employee. She was a silent confidant who had witnessed Evelyn's entire rise. "Ma'am, Maria, I need you to tell me something." Evelyn turned in her chair to face the housekeeper. "Do you remember all the visits Victor made here before he passed?" Maria adjusted her apron, a nervous gesture that didn't go unnoticed. "Yes, ma'am. Mr. Caldwell came frequently for meetings. There was a man," Evelyn continued, studying the housekeeper's reaction. "Younger, tall, always well-dressed. He might have come with Victor a few times." Maria's face paled slightly. "Mr. Marcus, yes, he came a few times, always very polite, but there was something about him that made me uneasy," Maria confessed. "And the last time he was here, the night before Mr. Victor, well, they argued a lot." Evelyn felt a shiver run down her spine. "Why did you never tell me this?" "You never asked, Mom," Maria replied simply. And after that night, it seemed better not to bring up the subject. With a gesture, Evelyn dismissed the housekeeper. Her hands trembled slightly as she typed more commands into the computer. In a few minutes, several windows opened on the screen. Old records, photos from corporate events, archived news reports. In a particularly revealing photo from a charity event 10 years ago, there he was, Marcus Taylor, half blurred in the background, observing. It wasn't a coincidence. He had been watching her for years. Her cell phone vibrated with a message from Beatrice Vanderbilt. "We need to talk. Urgent. Washington Square Park. 1 hour." Evelyn hesitated. Beatrice had always been an ally in the corporate world, but after the events of the previous night, she didn't know who to trust anymore. Still, information was power, and she needed all the possible pieces of that puzzle. At the park, located in the heart of Greenwich Village, Beatrice was already waiting. Elegant as always in her Chanel suit, she seemed nervous, something rare for the normally unshakable Secretary of Culture. "What did you do last night?" Beatrice asked without preamble as soon as Evelyn sat down. "What are you talking about? That auction. You weren't supposed to be there." Beatrice lowered her voice. "Someone set you up, Evelyn. And I think I know who." Evelyn leaned forward, keeping her voice equally low. "Who?" "Sarah Caldwell is back in New York," Beatrice revealed, "and she's not alone. She brought with her some interesting investors, people who have a lot to lose if certain documents come to light." "How do you know all this?" A sad smile crossed Beatrice's lips. "Because I should have warned you before, but they convinced me it would be better to stay quiet. They told me it was just a test to see your reaction." "And Marcus, what's his role in all this?" Beatrice visibly paled. "Marcus Taylor, he's involved." "You didn't know?" "Evelyn," Beatrice held her friend's hand tightly, "if Marcus is involved, the situation is much worse than I imagined. He's not just a player on this board, he's—" The noise of a motorcycle speeding by interrupted the sentence. When the sound ceased, Beatrice seemed to have lost the courage to continue. "He's what?" Evelyn insisted. "Not here," Beatrice stood up abruptly. "Meet me tonight. I have something to show you." "Something Victor left before—" "Where?" "At the place where it all began," Beatrice replied enigmatically. "You know where." As she watched her friend hurry away, Evelyn realized her hands were shaking. In less than 24 hours, her perfectly controlled world had turned into a minefield. And now, in addition to the Hamptons, she had another crucial meeting ahead. Her cell phone vibrated again. A message from Marcus. "Be careful with the questions you ask. Not everyone is prepared for the answers." Evelyn looked around, feeling watched. Somewhere, someone was moving the pieces of a much bigger game than she imagined, and she needed to figure out the rules before it was too late. The Chrysler Building, New York's first Art Deco skyscraper, held within its depths stories dating back to the city's golden years. It was there, on the 61st floor, that Evelyn had started her career alongside Victor Caldwell. And it was there that Beatrice was waiting for her, 2 decades later. The old elevator creaked at each floor, bringing to the surface memories that Evelyn preferred to keep dormant. The characteristic smell of old wood and paper still permeated the corridor when she reached her destination. The former headquarters of Caldwell Cosmetics remained virtually untouched, like a museum of simpler times. "You came," Beatrice's voice echoed through the empty office. She was sitting in Victor's old chair, a sight that immediately caused Evelyn discomfort. "What did you find out, Beatrice?" "It's not what I found out," she replied, opening a drawer in the desk. "It's what Victor left for you to find." With deliberately slow movements, Beatrice pulled out a brown envelope, yellowed by time. Evelyn's name was handwritten on it, in Victor's unmistakable calligraphy. "How did you get this?" "Victor approached me a week before passing," Beatrice explained, her hands trembling slightly. "He knew something was about to happen. He said that if you ever got involved with Marcus Taylor, I should give you this." Evelyn took the envelope, feeling the weight of history in her hands. Victor knew about Marcus all this time. "Evelyn," Beatrice stood up, walking to the window. "Marcus isn't just someone Victor knew. He's the son no one knew Victor had." The envelope slipped from Evelyn's hands, scattering its contents across the floor. Old photographs, documents, newspaper clippings. In one of the photos, a young Marcus next to Victor, both smiling on some distant beach. "Impossible," Evelyn murmured, bending down to collect the papers. Victor had an affair years before meeting Sarah," Beatrice continued. "Marcus's mother was an international model. The relationship was kept secret, but Victor never abandoned his son. He financed his studies abroad, his career. Why did he never tell me?" "Because Marcus didn't just want his father's acknowledgement," Beatrice turned to face Evelyn. "He wanted revenge against everyone he believed had stolen his rightful place, including you." Evelyn felt the blood freeze in her veins. The pieces were starting to fit together. The auction, the constant surveillance, the intimate knowledge Marcus had about her life. "Does Sarah know about this?" "She knows now," Beatrice replied, "and that's why she's back. The documents you keep aren't just about shady business deals, are they? There's something about Marcus in them, something Victor entrusted to you." Evelyn closed her eyes, remembering the night in the Hamptons. Victor had handed her a specific folder with instructions to never open it unless something happened to him. "The real will," Evelyn whispered. "Victor changed his will that night, leaving everything to Marcus," Beatrice completed. "But the document never appeared after his passing. Sarah inherited everything, and Marcus—" A noise in the corridor interrupted the conversation. Footsteps were approaching. Beatrice paled. "They followed me," she murmured, panic in her voice. "Evelyn, you need to go now." "Not without you. I brought you into a trap," Beatrice confessed, tears in her eyes. "Forgive me. They forced me, but I can't let them hurt you. There's a service. Stairway behind that door. Go." Evelyn hesitated for only a second before running to the exit indicated. The sound of male voices was approaching rapidly. "What are you going to do?" she asked, looking one last time at her friend. "I'm going to try to fix my mistake," Beatrice replied, a sad smile on her lips. "And Evelyn, don't trust anyone, not even me." The elevator doors opened at the moment Evelyn disappeared down the service stairway. In her hands, Victor's envelope and its explosive revelations. In her mind, a new understanding of the deadly game she was involved in. Marcus wasn't just a player on this board. He was the legitimate heir to an empire built on secrets and lies. And now Evelyn needed to decide. Use the truth as a bargaining chip, or face the consequences of 15 years of kept secrets. The armored Mercedes cut through FDR Drive at high speed. In the back seat, Evelyn examined the photographs found. In Victor's envelope, each image revealing a story she had never suspected existed. Marcus appeared at different ages, child, teenager, young adult, always beside Victor, always far from the eyes of the world. "Ma'am, are you sure you don't want me to call for backup?" Charles, her driver, asked through the intercom. "No, Charles. The fewer people who know, the better," Evelyn replied, storing the photos. "Just take me to the bank and stay alert for any suspicious vehicle." The J.P. Morgan building on Park Avenue was her first stop. Her private safe deposit box held more than just compromising documents. It held her survival. As she rode up the private elevator, Evelyn recapped her plan. She had less than 24 hours before the deadline set to go to the Hamptons. In the vault room, the manager greeted her with the usual deference. "Miss Morgan, What a pleasant surprise. It's been while since we've seen you here. I need privacy, Rebecca, Evelyn replied dryly, heading to her private safe deposit box. Inside the armored room, Evelyn opened the folder Victor had given her 15 years ago. The will was there, exactly as she remembered. But there was more. Letters, bank transfer records, and an old flash drive. Her cell phone vibrated, a message from an unknown number. The truth doesn't always set us free. Sometimes it condemns us. Evelyn ignored the veiled threat. With precise movements, she photographed each document with her specially encrypted cell phone. The original material would remain in the safe, her guarantee if something went wrong. Back in the car, she made a call she had been putting off for a long time. "Hello." Sarah Caldwell's voice still maintained the same aristocratic tone from years ago. "Sarah, we need to talk." A moment of silence. "Evelyn, finally. I imagined that after the auction you would get in touch. Did you know about Marcus from the beginning?" A bitter laugh echoed through the line. "Darling, I always knew. Victor thought he could hide his secrets from me, but a wife always knows. The question is, why did you keep his secret all these years?" "You know why," Evelyn replied, her voice firm. "Victor trusted me." "No, Evelyn, Victor used you just as he used all of us. You were young, ambitious, easy to manipulate. He turned you into his secret keeper while paving the way for Marcus." Evelyn felt a lump in her throat. "What do you want, Sarah?" "I want you to bring all the documents to the Hamptons. Not just the will, everything. It's time to clean up this story. And if I refuse, then—" Sarah paused dramatically. "I'll have to use what I know about you, about that night, about what really happened to Victor." Evelyn ended the call, her heart racing. She turned to the car window, watching the city she loved so much pass by in a blur. On her laptop, she opened a specific file, Contingency PDF. It was her emergency plan, meticulously prepared over the years. "Charles, take me home. I need to prepare some things." At her penthouse apartment, Maria was waiting for her with a worried expression. "Ma'am, someone was here while you were out." Evelyn froze. "What do you mean?" "Nothing was taken or messed up, but—" Maria hesitated. "I found this on your bed." She handed over a white envelope. Inside was just a card with a handwritten message. How do you think Victor would feel knowing his protégé kept secrets even from him? The handwriting was Marcus's. Evelyn walked to her closet, activating a hidden panel behind her clothes. A small safe was revealed. Inside it, a single red folder, her last ace in the hole. Her cell phone vibrated again. It was Marcus. "You have a choice, Evelyn. You always did. But now time is running out." Sitting in her favorite armchair, Evelyn opened her laptop and began typing. Her scheduled email that would be sent automatically to various recipients if something happened to her. It was time to put all her pieces on the board. "Maria," she called her housekeeper, "pack a bag for 2 days. I'm going to the Hamptons." As night fell over New York, Evelyn made one last call. The voice on the other end answered on the first ring. "I thought you'd never call," Marcus said, his voice smooth as velvet. "Why didn't you tell me the truth from the beginning?" "You weren't ready to hear it," he replied. "You're still not, but in the Hamptons everything will become clear." Evelyn looked at the red folder in her hands. "You have no idea what I know, Marcus, what I've discovered all these years." "On the contrary, Evelyn, I know exactly what you know. The question is, are you prepared for the consequences of using that information?" The line went dead, leaving Evelyn alone with her thoughts and plans. In less than 24 hours, she would be back at the place where it all began, and this time she was determined to end this story on her own terms. The winding road leading to the Hamptons serpentined between the lush green landscapes, each curve bringing back memories that Evelyn had tried to bury for 15 years. The fresh sea air seemed heavier than she remembered. "Ma'am, we've arrived," announced Charles, parking in front of the luxurious Southampton beach house. The place hadn't changed much. The same imposing architecture, the same meticulously manicured gardens. "Stay nearby," Evelyn instructed her driver. "I might need to leave in a hurry." In the foyer of the house, The butler greeted her with a practiced smile. "Welcome, Miss Morgan. Mrs. Caldwell left specific instructions for your arrival." Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine at hearing the name. In her hands, the red folder felt as heavy as lead. Inside it, not just Victor's will, but something far more valuable and dangerous. The designated room was the same as 15 years ago, the master suite, with a view of the Atlantic Ocean. Evelyn walked to the window, watching the mist that embraced the coastline. It was here in this very room that Victor had told her about his terminal illness. Her cell phone vibrated, a message from Marcus. "The guest house at 3 p.m. Come alone." The guest house. The true setting of everything that had happened on that fateful night. Evelyn closed her eyes, memories flooding her mind like a slow-motion film. "You'll have to protect my legacy," Victor had said, handing her the folder with the will. "There are people who would do anything to prevent the truth from coming to light." What truth? She had asked at the time. About Marcus, about the company, about everything. A knock on the door brought her back to the present. It was a maid with an envelope. "Miss Morgan, Mrs. Caldwell asked to deliver this personally." Inside the envelope, an old key and a note. "This is your last chance to do the right thing. Bring everything." Evelyn took out her tablet, accessing the files she had digitized from the safe. Each document told part of the story, but there was something that no one but her knew, not even Victor. Her phone rang. It was Sarah. "Already settled in, darling?" "What do you really want, Sarah?" A sigh on the other end of the line. "I want what's rightfully mine. What Victor tried to take from me by changing his will." "And Marcus, what does he want?" "Why don't you ask him?" Sarah replied with a dry laugh. "After all, you two have a lot to talk about, don't you? About that night, about the documents, about Victor." Evelyn felt her stomach churn. "You know. I know much more than you imagine, darling. The question is, what are you going to do with that information?" The line went dead. Evelyn walked to her suitcase, pulling out a small, electronic device. It was a special recorder prepared for this occasion. Her watch showed 2:30 p.m. In 30 minutes, she would be face-to-face with Marcus in the guest house. With Sarah lurking, every move had to be calculated. A soft knock on the door startled her. Upon opening it, she found a thick envelope on the floor. Inside it, old photos, her and Victor at various moments over the years. But there was something strange about them. Looking more closely, Evelyn noticed, in each photo, in the background, almost imperceptible, was Marcus, watching, waiting. "Impressive archive, isn't it?" Marcus's voice echoed down the hallway. He was standing there, impeccable in his dark suit, like a materialized shadow. "How?" "You weren't the only one Victor trained to keep secrets," he replied, approaching. "The difference is that I was born for this. It's my birthright." Evelyn maintained her composure. Years of corporate negotiations had prepared her for moments of pressure. "Why now, Marcus? Why after so long?" He smiled, that enigmatic smile that disturbed her so much. "Because now you're ready to know the truth. About Victor, about me, about yourself." "At the guest house?" "At the guest house," he confirmed, turning to leave. "Oh, and Evelyn, bring the red folder, the real one." When he disappeared down the hallway, Evelyn closed the door and took a deep breath. In her mind, Victor's words echoed, "Sometimes the greatest danger isn't in keeping a secret, but in revealing it." The clock inexorably moved towards 3 p.m. It was time to face the ghosts of the past, even if it meant losing everything she had built. The guest house seemed smaller than Evelyn remembered. Nestled among ancient oak trees, the stone and wood structure held secrets that had shaped her life for the past 15 years. The sound of her heels on the stone path echoed in the afternoon quiet as the mist began to descend over the coastal landscape. Marcus was waiting for her on the porch, leaning against the old wooden railing. His Italian suit had been exchanged for a cashmere sweater and dark pants, an image so similar to Victor that it made Evelyn pause for a moment. "Very impressive, isn't it?" he commented, noticing her hesitation. "How genes can be so precise in their cruelty." "Where's Sarah?" Evelyn asked, climbing the porch steps. She'll come. But first, you and I need to have a long overdue conversation. The interior of the guest house was exactly as it had been that night. The same rustic furniture, the same stone fireplace, even the old Steinway piano in the corner of the room. The only difference was a brown folder on the coffee table, identical to the one Victor always carried. "Did you bring it?" Marcus asked, indicating the red folder in Evelyn's hands. "First," she replied, keeping her distance, "I want to know the truth. All of it." Marcus poured himself a whiskey, the same brand Victor used to drink. "The truth? Are you sure you're ready for it?" "Stop the games, Marcus," he smiled, that smile she now recognized so well. Victor wasn't sick, Evelyn. Not in the way he made you believe. The floor seemed to disappear beneath Evelyn's feet. "What are you talking about?" "My father," Marcus continued, savoring each word, "was a man who believed the end justifies the means. He planned everything. His illness, his will, even. His departure. Impossible. I saw the exams, the medical reports. All forged," a female voice interrupted. Sarah Caldwell emerged from the shadows of the hallway, elegant as always in her Chanel suit. Victor was a master at creating alternative realities. Evelyn sat down, her legs no longer supporting the weight of the revelations. "Why?" "Because he needed a successor," Marcus explained, approaching. "Someone who could protect his true legacy. And you, Evelyn, were perfect, young, brilliant, and most importantly, manipulable." "I wasn't manipulated," Evelyn protested, but her voice betrayed her uncertainty. Sarah laughed, a humorless sound. "Weren't you? Victor molded you, darling. Every promotion, every decision of yours was carefully orchestrated. Even your discovery of the compromising documents was planned. But the will was real," Marcus confirmed, "but not for the reasons you imagine. Victor wasn't protecting me. He was using me just as he used you, as he used Sarah, as he used everyone around him." Evelyn opened her red folder with trembling hands, pulling out a document she had kept all these years. "Then this was also part of his plan?" Marcus took the paper, his eyes widening as he read its contents. "Where did you get this?" "The night Victor supposedly passed," Evelyn replied, her voice gaining strength. "I came back to the guest house. I found this in his personal safe. That's why you're really here, isn't it? Not for the will, not for the company, but for this." Sarah approached, trying to see the document. Marcus kept it out of her reach. "What is that?" Sarah demanded. "The real reason why Victor faked his own departure," Evelyn replied, standing up. "He wasn't protecting an empire, Sarah. He was running from one." "What are you talking about?" "Victor discovered something," Marcus said, his voice now carrying an emotion Evelyn had never heard before. "Something that could destroy not just the company but all the families involved, including yours, Sarah." A distant thunder echoed across the coast, as if nature itself was responding to the tension in the room. Evelyn walked to the window, watching the mist that now completely enveloped the guest house. "So now you know," a new voice emerged from the door. All three turned, surprised. There, standing like a ghost from the past, was Victor Caldwell. The silence that followed Victor's entrance was thick enough to be cut with a knife. He looked older, naturally, but maintained the same imposing posture that Evelyn remembered. His hair, now completely white, and a few more wrinkles were the only visible signs of the time that had passed. "Impressive how some secrets manage to bring all the right people to the same place," Victor commented, entering the guest house with the familiarity of someone who had never really left. Sarah was the first to recover her voice. 15 years, Victor. 15 years making us believe that I had passed," he completed, pouring himself his favorite whiskey. "It was necessary, just as every move I've made since then was necessary." "Necessary?" Marcus advanced a step, his voice trembling with contained anger. "You abandoned your own son, manipulated all of us, and for what?" Victor sat in his old armchair, as if he were just returning from a short trip. "To protect you. All of you." Evelyn remained silent, observing. Her mind was working frantically, connecting dots that previously seemed disconnected. "The documents," she finally said. They weren't just about the company. They were about all the traditional families of New York. Victor smiled, that smile she knew so well, the smile of a proud teacher. Go on, Evelyn. Caldwell Cosmetics was just the tip of the iceberg. There was an entire network of companies, families, and politicians, all connected by something bigger. Project Phoenix, Sarah whispered, visibly paling. Exactly, Victor confirmed. A project that began 40 years ago, when the main families of New York united to create a system of influence that would control not just the market, but the city itself. Marcus examined the document in his hands again. This paper is proof of everything. It's more than that, Evelyn answered before Victor could speak. It's the names of everyone involved, including your father, Marcus, Victor completed. Your real mother wasn't an international model. She was an investigative journalist who uncovered Project Phoenix, and when she threatened to expose everything, they silenced her, Marcus concluded, his voice laden with new understanding. That's why you chose me, Evelyn realized, the pieces finally falling into place. Not because I was manipulable, but because I had no connections to any of the traditional families. Victor stood up, walking to the window. The mist outside had become even denser, isolating the guest house from the rest of the world. I needed someone from outside the system, he explained. Someone who could protect the truth without being compromised by family ties or old alliances. And you, Evelyn, proved to be more than I could have hoped for. And me? Sarah asked, her voice betraying years of hurt. What was my role in this grand plan of yours? Victor smiled, turning to face her. You were the perfect guardian. No one would suspect that the grieving widow was helping to protect New York's biggest secret. So every document I collected, Evelyn reflected, every secret I kept, was protection, Victor completed. The more compromising material you had on each involved family, the less likely they would be to expose the truth about Project Phoenix. And now, Marcus asked, his initial anger giving way to intense curiosity, why reveal all this now? Victor walked to the piano, running his fingers gently over the keys. Because Project Phoenix is about to enter its final phase. The families are moving, preparing something big, something that will change the face of New York forever. And you want us to stop it, Evelyn concluded. No, Victor smiled, that enigmatic smile she knew so well. I want you to take control of it. The silence that followed was deafening. Evelyn looked at Marcus, who seemed as surprised as she was. Sarah, on the other hand, had a glimmer of understanding in her eyes. The will, Sarah said softly. It was never about the company, it was about Project Phoenix. And now, Victor concluded, it's up to you three to decide what to do with this legacy. Protect it, destroy it, or transform it into something new. Evelyn felt the weight of the red folder in her hands. No longer just a set of documents, but the future of an entire city. Why us three? She finally asked. Victor smiled one last time, walking towards the door. Because you're the only people who have proven to be smarter than the system itself, and now the system is yours. The mist was beginning to dissipate when Victor left the guest house, his figure disappearing among the oak trees like a ghost, returning to its world. In the silence that followed, Evelyn, Marcus, and Sarah remained motionless, each absorbing the weight of the revelations and the choices they would have to make. So that's it? Marcus was the first to speak, his voice carrying a mixture of disbelief and fascination. He simply hands us control of something so powerful and walks away? Evelyn walked to the piano, gently touching the same keys Victor had touched moments before. He's not walking away, he's testing us one last time. How can you be so sure? Sarah asked, pouring herself a shot of whiskey. Because it's what I would do, Evelyn replied, turning to face the other two. Project Phoenix isn't just about power or control. It's about transformation. Like the mythical bird, it needs to be destroyed to be reborn from the ashes. Marcus examined the document in his hands again. These names, they're people who would trust their children and heirs more than strangers. If the three of us unite, we could do something different, Evelyn completed. Something that doesn't involve manipulation or control, but real change. Sarah laughed softly. but there was no humor in her voice. "You're incredibly naive. Do you really think these families would allow any change to a system that has benefited them for decades?" "No," Evelyn smiled, pulling something else from her red folder. "But they won't have a choice, because while Victor was busy orchestrating his grand plan, I was building my own." It was a flash drive, small and seemingly insignificant. "For the last 15 years, I haven't just kept secrets. I've created connections, people in strategic positions who were tired of the old system. Ethical journalists, idealistic politicians, forward-thinking entrepreneurs. They parallel network," Marcus realized, his eyes shining with new understanding. "You built your own phoenix while protecting the old one." "And now," Sarah concluded, a smile of admiration appearing on her lips, "you need us to make the transition." "Work?" Evelyn nodded. "Marcus has the name and legitimacy as the Caldwell heir. Sarah has the social connections and the trust of the old families. And You have the plan," Marcus completed, approaching her. "You always did, didn't you? Since that night 15 years ago, when you came back to the guest house and found that document." "Victor taught me well," Evelyn admitted. "Perhaps better than he imagined." The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in orange hues that penetrated through the windows of the guest house. Sarah walked to the fireplace, observing the old photographs on the mantel. "You know what's ironic?" she commented. "Victor spent his entire life building a system based on secrets and manipulation, and in the end, his greatest achievement was creating people capable of destroying it." "Not destroying," Evelyn corrected gently. "Transforming. Power doesn't have to be synonymous with oppression. It can be a force for positive change." Marcus extended his hand, taking the flash drive. "And when do we start?" "Now," Evelyn replied, pulling out her cell phone. "Actually, it's already begun. While we were here, my trusted team is implementing the first phase of the plan. By dawn, New York will see the birth of a new era." "And Victor?" Sarah asked, one last concern in her voice. Evelyn smiled, that same enigmatic smile she had learned from her mentor. "He's exactly where he needs to be, watching his phoenix be reborn through younger hands and bolder minds." The three approached the window, observing the city that stretched out in the valley below, its lights beginning to twinkle in the twilight. It was a breathtaking sight, a metropolis on the brink of a transformation that no one except them could foresee. "To the future," Marcus raised his glass. "To transformation," Sarah added. "To rebirth," Evelyn completed. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared on the horizon, the three remained there, united no longer by secrets and manipulations, but by a shared vision of change. Project Phoenix was dead. Long live the new Phoenix that would be born from its ashes. Somewhere in the Hamptons, Victor Caldwell smiled, satisfied. His true legacy wasn't power or control, but the people he had shaped to be better than he had ever been. And now finally he could rest, knowing that his work was complete. Night fell over the Hamptons, but for Evelyn, Marcus, and Sarah, it was just the beginning of a new dawn. The auction that had brought Evelyn there now seemed a distant event, almost insignificant in the face of the magnitude of what was to come. Sometimes, Evelyn thought, you need to get completely lost to find an entirely new path.